At my son's wedding, his mother-in-law's voice sliced through the ceremony like a jagged blade dragged across silk. "That's not a mother," she declared, her words blooming loud and venomous enough to halt the string quartet mid-note and turn every head in the garden like sunflowers chasing a sudden eclipse. "That's a regrettable accident in a Sunday dress." The bride, my almost daughter-in-law, burst into a peal of laughter, high and brittle, clapping her hands together as if it were the punchline to the season's best joke. But my son, Tyler, he didn't laugh. He didn't even flinch. He simply straightened his shoulders, the color draining from his face like water from a cracked vase. And in that frozen instant, I watched the man I raised become something sharper, something unbreakable. He stood, seized the microphone from the officiant with a politeness that bordered on eerie, and called off the wedding right there, in front of 300 stunned guests, the air thick with the scent of wilting peonies and shattered illusions. Then, the very next day, he executed a plan we'd whispered about in the dim hours after midnight. One that didn't just end a marriage, but unraveled the threads of an entire family's empire, thread by careful thread. Where are you tuning in from today, my resilient friends? Drop your city, your corner of the world, in the comments below. Let's see if we're building a global chorus of the quietly fierce. Hit that like button if this hook's got you leaning in. Subscribe for the full unraveling, and join our community here at Shattered Voices, where we trade stories of survival like heirlooms. Because this tale, it proves that the soft-spoken can wield the heaviest hammers. Now, settle in with your tea or your nightcap, because I'm going to take you back, 6 months before that sun-drenched catastrophe, to the roots of it all. This is the story of how a single careless barb became the spark for a reckoning that echoed for years. 6 months earlier, I was tucked into the unremarkable rhythms of Cedar Falls, Iowa, a town where the biggest scandal is usually a late frost nipping the cornstalks. My days revolved around the kind of deliberate ordinariness that lulls the world into complacency. Tending my front yard flower beds with the solemnity of a UN negotiation, debating tulips versus daffodils as if they held the key to world peace. At 62, I embody the archetype of the genteel widow, sustained by my late husband Jim's modest pension from his days at the John Deere plant, piloting my reliable 2012 Honda Civic to the Piggly Wiggly for bulk oats and discount yarn, and anchoring every church potluck with my green bean casserole, laced just so with cream of mushroom soup and a whisper of almond slivers for that elusive crunch. To my neighbors and the ladies at the senior center knitting circle, I was Margaret Henderson, predictable as the prairie winds, her life a tidy square of manicured lawn and lace-curtained windows. What they, and soon what the Walsh family, could never suspect was that this facade was no accident of age or grief. It was a masterpiece of misdirection, honed over decades, as meticulously crafted as the pearl necklace I wore to funerals. My simple life, it was camouflage, the kind that lets predators overlook the trap until their claws are caught. Tyler, my only child, had tumbled headlong into love with Jessica Walsh over the span of 8 whirlwind months.
A courtship that felt less like romance and more like a hostile takeover. At 34, he was the steady sort, an environmental engineer with calloused hands from fieldwork and a laugh that still lit up like the boy who'd once built forts from hay bales. Jessica, though, she was a force of nature polished to a high gloss. 29, with a marketing degree from Northwestern, a LinkedIn profile stacked with influencer collabs, and an Instagram feed that curated her life like a high-end catalog. Brunches and sun-dappled cafes, yoga poses at dawn, captions about manifesting abundance. I'd met her precisely twice before she launched into wedding planning with the fervor of a corporate raider eyeing an undervalued stock. Our first encounter was at Tyler's birthday dinner, a casual affair at my kitchen table under the hum of the overhead fan. She arrived 15 minutes late, traffic from the city her excuse, and spent the meal not eating her meticulously plated heirloom tomato salad, drizzled with balsamic reduction and flecked with burrata, but photographing it from every angle, chasing that golden hour glow through the window blinds. Between clicks, she peppered me with questions that landed like velvet-wrapped probes. So, Mrs. Henderson, have you thought about downsizing now that it's just you? The market's hot for starter homes like yours. And later, as she scrolled her phone for inspo on cake flavors, what's your retirement looking like? Fixed income must be so secure.
I answered with the warm vagueness of a woman who'd learned long ago that half-truths are the best shields, smiling over my chipped mug of chamomile, murmuring about taking it one day at a time. Tyler beamed across the table, oblivious, his hand on hers like an anchor. Our second meeting was her idea, billed as family bonding over coffee and scones at my bungalow. She brought her mother, Patricia Walsh, along like a chaperone to a duel. Patricia breezed through my front door in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and linen separates, her eyes sweeping the space with the appraising chill of a realtor at an open house. "Oh, Margaret," she cooed, perching on the edge of my floral print sofa as if it might stain her. "This is so authentically you. Charming in that mid-century rustic way. Have you ever considered updating the wallpaper? Something with more lift?" Jessica, meanwhile, excused herself to freshen up and vanished into my kitchen for a good 20 minutes. I found her later, door ajar, methodically opening cabinets, peering at my mismatched Tupperware, fingering the rims of my wedding china like a sommelier assessing vintage. "Just seeing if there's room for expansion," she said with a wink, as if we were already stocking shelves for grandbabies. Patricia settled deeper into conversation, sinking into Jim's old leather recliner, the one with the faint indentation from his evening reads, like she was claiming spoils of war. "We're simply thrilled about Tyler," she said, her voice a syrupy drawl honed in boardrooms and country clubs. "Jessica's always had an eye for potential, you know. It's vital in our circles to build on solid scaffolding, a proper family legacy." She paused, her manicured nails tapping a rhythm on the armrest, then leaned in with that smile, the one edged like a debutante's fan. "And for the older generation, it's about gracious contribution, isn't it? Perhaps not the grand gestures, but the quiet ones. Emotional support. Babysitting, if it comes to that." She laughed, a tinkling sound meant to disarm, but it landed like a pat on the head from a height. I swallowed a sip of my Earl Grey to steady the heat rising in my chest, the kind that had once fueled late-night arguments with Jim over crop yields and bank loans. Patronized, cataloged, dismissed as the quaint footnote in their glossy narrative. If only she'd glanced at the locked drawer in my desk
where brokerage statements whispered of a very different ledger. 15 years of compound interest, dividend reinvestments, and options trades I'd executed with the same quiet precision I'd used to balance farm books during the 80s recession. While Patricia debated between Hermes scarves at Neiman's, I'd been outmaneuvering market dips, turning Jim's life insurance payout into a diversified empire of index funds, real estate trusts, and a stake in a Des Moines tech startup that had just gone public. But no, to them, I was the Iowa relic, good for a hug and a casserole, not a check.
Tyler, bless his earnest heart, floated through it all on a cloud of infatuation. He saw Jessica's sun-kissed highlights and her stories of networking retreats in Napa as proof of destiny, not due diligence. He couldn't spot the way her gaze lingered on his watch, a simple Timex, or how she steered conversations toward future-proofing their life together with casual mentions of prenups and asset protection. In a darker corner of my mind, I even respected her game. She was a climber with climbing gear, mapping the terrain with ruthless efficiency. But here's the truth about small-town widows like me. We didn't endure the '73 oil crisis, the farm foreclosures of the '80s, Jim's slow fade from pancreatic cancer, and the loneliness that followed by mistaking foxes for hens. We play harmless because the arrogant spill their secrets like cheap wine when they think you're just a sponge. The engagement dropped in mid-November, announced not with a ring reveal party, but with Jessica's phone call, a decree wrapped in confetti emojis. Mrs. Henderson, oh sorry, Mom now, right? Her laugh crackled through the speaker, all static and sparkle. We've set the date. June 15th at the family estate outside Des Moines. It's this gorgeous spread. 300 guests, no sweat. Mother's locked in the florist, the one who did the governor's inauguration. And listen, we totally get if your family's more low-key, maybe a backyard thing for your side. We don't want to overwhelm. I murmured the requisite O's and how wonders, my free hand absently twisting the dish rag on the counter. But beneath the pleasantries, my mind, tuned sharp by years of poring over crop futures and mortgage rates, began its own ledger. Columns of leverage, rows of risk. Jessica's oversight, monumental. She'd never dug into my maiden name O'Malley or the family lore of my grandfather who'd bootstrapped a grain co-op into a regional powerhouse during the Dust Bowl. Nor had she connected the dots to the anonymous investor who'd quietly funded a rival ag tech firm nibbling at the edges of Gordon Walsh's fertilizer empire. My resources weren't flashy, they were surgical. 3 weeks later, I slipped into Robert Chen's office in Waterloo, the one with the ficus that always leaned too far left, and the wall of framed CFA plaques. Annual reports fanned across his desk like a poker hand I'd already won. Robert, a wiry man in his 50s with a penchant for bow ties, peered over his half-moons, his voice laced with that rare financier's reverence. "Margaret, you're a unicorn. Up 12% year over year against the S&P's 8%. Your liquid net worth? Conservatively, $3.8 million. With the REITs and that biotech play maturing next quarter, we could push toward 5 by EOI. How do you do it? It's like you see the dips coming." I folded my hands, offering the demure smile I reserved for Quilt Guild compliments. Patience, Robert, and a little prayer. But inside, a coal I'd banked since Jim's funeral glowed hot. He'd always said I had the O'Malley eye, that knack for spotting patterns in chaos. This fortune, it was my rebellion, my quiet roar against a world that wrote off women like me as footnotes. While the Walshes flaunted their old money from Gordon's chain of commercial real estate holdings, strip malls and self-storage units bloated on leveraged loans. I'd built mine debt-free, diversified, and dormant, a sleeping giant waiting for the right alarm. The plan didn't erupt. It accreted layer by layer, like interest on a CD. Tyler rang that very afternoon, his voice a mix of boyish thrill and adult anxiety. "Mom, Jessica's folks are hosting a welcome dinner next Saturday at their place. Just immediate family. They're dying to know you better." A pause, then softer. "It's fancy, though. Gordon's got this whole business empire thing going. Real estate, investments. I don't want you stressing, okay? You're perfect as you are." My throat tightened, not at the warning, but at the inversion. My boy, shielding me from them. He had no clue that Robert swapped war stories with Walsh's money manager at the Iowa CFA mixers, or that I'd already flagged Gordon's overextended loans in a casual Bloomberg scan. "Sweetheart," I said, injecting the honey of a mother's ease, "fancy's just napkins and nouns. I'll wear my navy blue, the one with the pearl buttons. We'll charm them socks off." It was truth, pure and pointed. I would be myself, the version they weren't ready for. The Walsh estate loomed like a transplant from a Jane Austen novel gone rogue, a sprawling colonial revival pile on 50 acres of manicured turf, complete with cobblestone drive that crunched under my Civic's tires like brittle bones. I parked amid a fleet of gleaming Audis and Escalades, feeling less like an intruder and more like a scout in enemy lines. Jessica greeted me at the portico, resplendent in emerald silk that hugged her like a second ambition. Her hug air-kissed and efficient. "You made it. Come in. The bar's divine. Try the elderflower gimlet." Inside, it was opulence dialed to 11, Carrara marble floors echoing like a cathedral, crystal chandeliers dripping light like molten sugar, walls lined with oils of glowering patriarchs in starched collars. Patricia descended the grand staircase in a sheath of ivory crepe, pearls winking like sniper scopes, her arms outstretched in theatrical welcome. "Margaret, our prodigal almost mother!" Gordon trailed her, a bearish man in his late 60s with a salt and pepper mane and a handshake that crushed like a vice grip. Testing, always testing. "Gordon Walsh," he boomed, "please to stake a claim on your boy." Dinner unfolded in a room the size of my entire bungalow, under a frescoed ceiling depicting some mythic harvest, ironic given their urbanite detachment from soil. Waitstaff in black livery ghosted in with courses, seared foie gras and brioche, a frisée solid with candied pecans and goat cheese that probably costs more per bite than my weekly grocery run. Conversation flowed like the Napa Valley Cabernet they poured, effusive tales of their Patagonia trek, complete with Yakul anecdotes. The gut renovation of their Door County lake house, now with a wine cellar for 2,000 bottles. And the black tie gala they'd headlined for the symphony, where Patricia had charmed a $50K pledge from a single toast. I nodded along, the wide-eyed provincial, piping up with gentle prompts. "Patagonia, did the altitude ever get to you?" Tyler sat to my left, squeezing my knee under the damask cloth, his gratitude palpable. Then Gordon, fortified by his third glass, pivoted to me like a lecturer spotting a ripe pupil. He leaned back, cufflinks glinting under the candlelight, and launched into sermon mode. "Wealth, Margaret, it's not about grinding away at some 9 to 5. It's leverage, delegation, making your capital dance for you while you sip rosé on the veranda. Most folks chase the grind. Winners orchestrate the game. Simple math, really. His eyes twinkled with the smugness of the self-made, though whispers in financial circles pegged his empire as more inherited than innovated, propped on daddy's land deals and a string of subprime gambles from the aughts. Complex magic, if you ask me, I replied, forking a sliver of duck confit with feigned awe. I can barely balance my checkbook some months. Patricia seized the baton, her cool fingers alighting on mine like a butterfly with pins for wings. Oh, darling, we mustn't overwhelm you with the details. As for the wedding, pooh to costs. We know your situation is comfortable in its way. Modest means make for heartfelt contributions, after all. We'll cover the marquee, the full shebang. You just bask in the joy. She beamed, the table hanging on her magnanimity like courtiers. Tyler's fork clattered softly. Jessica examined her cut crystal water goblet as if it held the secrets of the universe. The air thickened, laced with truffle oil and unspoken hierarchies. Generous to a fault, Patricia, I murmured, my voice a feather over gravel, gratitude masking the forge in my gut. I'd loathe to strain anyone's ledger on my account. Phase 1 locked in then, irrevocable. They'd gifted me the script, full control. They'd have it. The venue, the vendors, the guest list bloated with their Rolodex. In exchange, freedom. To redirect my arsenal not to floral arches, but to fault lines. The months blurred into a pageant of their design. The engagement brunch at a Des Moines vineyard where Patricia suggested my toast be kept to 3 minutes, dear, heartwarming, not heartfelt. The bridal shower I hosted in my backyard where Jessica's friends cooed over the vintage charm while texting under the picnic table. The rehearsal dinner in the estate's solarium, all fairy lights and forced toasts, where Gordon pulled Tyler aside for a man-to-man on protecting the family's trajectory. I absorbed it, the sidelong glances at my practical flats, the way Patricia orchestrated seating charts to buffer me from influential guests, the bridal party's whispers about keeping it authentic while debating helicopter entrances. Tyler confided in me over late-night calls, his voice fraying at the edges. They're just excited, Mom. It's a lot, but Jessica says it's tradition. I listened, murmuring affirmations, all while my network hummed, a quiet call to my Des Moines attorney about shell entities, a nod to Robert on liquidating a bond for charitable purposes. The wedding eve passed in a haze of their perfection. Spa mornings for the bridal party I declined, citing a prior commitment to my book club. A groom's dinner where Gordon regaled with war stories of '08 bailouts he'd navigated flawlessly. I retired early to the guest cottage, the one with the 4-poster bed and views of the infinity pool, and penned a letter to Tyler I'd never send. Darling, love isn't a ledger, but if it tries to be, walk away clean. Dawn broke merciless on the 15th, the sky a flawless cerulean that mocked the storm brewing. I donned my navy chiffon, simple as a prayer, pearls from Jim's mother my talisman. The gardens overflowed, white tints billowing like sails, aisles of roses and blush and ivory, a quartet sawing Vivaldi under a pergola strung orchids, guests milled in pastel finery, old money from Chicago, tech bros from Silicon Prairie, the air humming with champagne flutes and murmured stock tips. I took my seat in the 3rd row, left side, the family section, cordoned by velvet ropes like a VIP lounge. Tyler stood at the altar, resplendent in charcoal tux, his eyes scanning for me with that boyish grin, until the procession began.
Jessica glided down the runner on Gordon's arm, a meringue of lace and Swarovski, her bouquet a cascade of white lilies that wept pollen like tears. Patricia, in the front pew, fanned herself dramatically, dabbing at non-existent emotion. The officiant cleared his throat, guests hushed, the quartet swelled into pachelbel. And then, mere feet from the vows, Patricia leaned to her sister Evelyn, a carbon copy in taupe silk, her voice a conspiratorial hiss, pitched just wrong for the acoustics. God, look at her back there, fussing with that pocketbook like it's the main event, trying so desperately. That's not a mother. That's a regrettable accident stuffed into a Sunday dress. Evelyn tittered, the sound carried, a ripple across the rows. Jessica, pivoting at the altar, caught it mid-stride. Her hand flew to her mouth, but not before the snort escaped raw and reveling, her shoulders shaking as she clapped once, twice in gleeful punctuation. The guests shifted, whispers igniting like dry tinder. I felt the words land, not as wounds, but as warrants. Permission at last. Tyler's face transformed, the soft edges hardening to quartz, his jaw a line carved in stone. He didn't erupt, he elevated. With a nod to the stunned officiant, he claimed the mic, his voice amplified calm, threading the speakers like a dirge. Ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, thank you for being here. But there's been an adjustment. He turned to Jessica, then to Patricia, his gaze a scalpel. I just overheard my fiancé and her mother mocking the woman who raised me alone, through floods and funerals and every quiet dawn in between. The woman who's more family than blood could ever claim. This wedding, it's off. Done. Pandemonium bloomed. Gordon surged forward, red-faced, bellowing about indignities and legalities. Patricia wailed, a banshee in pearls, clutching her pearls. Jessica crumpled to the runner, mascara rivers carding her cheeks, shrieking, Tyler, you can't! This is my day! Guests gawked, phones slipping from pockets to capture the spectacle. The quartet faltered to silence. Tyler unpinned his boutonniere, a single white rose, and laid it on the unattended gift table like an offering to ghosts. Then he walked the aisle's length, extended his hand to me. Mom, let's go home. We did in my Civic, the estate shrinking in the rear view as sirens of scandal wailed in our wake. He wept then, gust-deep sobs that shook the frame, and I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other on his knee, murmuring the farm wife pieties. It's over now, son, but you're just beginning. The next morning, while the Walshes barricaded in damage control, PR firms on speed dial, NDAs drafted for vendors, social feeds scrubbed of tags, our machinery engaged with the precision of a watch spring. Henderson Holdings, LLC, inked into existence a month prior under my attorney's pen, closed on the acquisition of Gordon's crown jewel, Agri-Store Partners, a chain of 27 farm supply outlets drowning in $45 million of high-interest debt from a botched expansion. I'd approached the lead creditor, a regional bank I'd quietly courted through Robert, weeks earlier, offering a clean buyout at 20% above market, cash on the barrel. Terms included non-compete clauses that gutted Gordon's supplier contracts overnight. By noon, my counsel fired off notices to his 3 shakiest partnerships, a strip mall REIT facing eminent domain whispers, a self-storage venture tangled in EPA fines for runoff violations, and a fertilizer subsidiary I'd tipped off to regulators about unreported nitrates. No malice in the filings, just facts, served cold. The dominoes teetered but didn't crash that day. Empires like the Walshes are built on illusions of solidity, and illusions die slow. Gordon's stock in his public holdings dipped 8% on the rumor mill alone. Patricia's charity board started realigning priorities. Jessica's Insta went dark, her abundance abruptly arid. Tyler,
He moved back to my bungalow for a spell, trading his lease for long talks over coffee, rebuilding his edges. We planted daffodils that spring, resilient, they pushed through frost, and he laughed again, genuine, like sunlight after hail. But the full fall, my dears, that's the banquet for next time. The leans that bloomed like weeds, the whispers that felled deals, the way quiet capital can eclipse loud legacy. We'll dissect it thread by thread, because reckonings aren't fireworks, they're erosion, patient and profound. Thank you for joining me in this chamber of shattered voices, where we honor the hammers hidden in whispers. If Margaret Steele stirred something in you, share your tale below. That time you let the axe fall, or held it just long enough to swing true. This is our sanctuary for the reclaimed. Like if it landed, subscribe to catch the cascade, and tap that bell. Your silence deserves shattering too. Until next reckoning, stay fierce. This is Shattered Voices.